So as you see, I was customizing my fabrics and my avatar a little bit more to fit the idea that I want. Okay, let's say this is the perfect design and I would like to share my work with the world. There's different ways of doing so. So yeah, just checking, everybody can still see my screen. You can decide that you want to make an export from like a flat so that you're just seeing the picture of the avatar. You can choose to do a turntable, and you can also choose to do an animation video or a render. And we're gonna briefly touch upon these different methods. First of all, like we mentioned before when we had our last guest, is that it depends what your goal is, what is advisable, what tool to use. Okay, so if you have too many windows and you cannot really see what you're doing, maybe you can collapse the window. And then if you want to open something again, you can just go double click and it will open it again. So the first thing that I would like to show is how to prepare the 3D window if you want to make an export. As you can see here at the bottom, we have a grid on the floor of the avatar, which preferably I do not like to export with my work. So what I do is I go on top, and then you have, let me just check because the UI changed a little bit. So in the settings, you have display, and then here you can see environment. So at the top menu, you go to settings, display, environment, and you can choose if you want to show the ground grid or remove it. Maybe when you're making an export, it's not so handy and you don't want to see it, but you can always bring it back because sometimes you are moving your avatar around or bringing in other avatars, and then it's nice to have your avatar centered to give you an indication of where they are. The second thing that you could choose to do is you could right click, and then you see you get a menu in the 3D window. So you right click in the window itself, not on the avatar, not on the garment, and it says Format 3D Background. If you would click on this one, it gives you two options. You could select that you want to use a picture that you want to add to your background or a solid fill. And when they're talking about solid fill, they're just referring to a color. So I can select the folder and I go back because we're having this flower obsession today. I will select the flower and click open, and then you see, okay, I've added a background. This can be to the taste or distaste of many. So it is also option to say, okay, I do not like that. I want a solid fill, but maybe I would like it to be like another color. And you can click on this gray box, and then you can go and say, okay, I would like to have maybe a lighter, but not completely white. And I say apply and close. And now I have a background that maybe contrasts my design better and it's nicer for the highlight. And then always click OK, or else it won't apply it. So this is the first way of changing your background if you want to export something. The next thing that you can do is you can go to File, and then we have different export options. And we have the snapshot. And the snapshot makes it possible to export a literal snapshot, a capture of the 3D window or of the 2D window on the right side. So in this case, I would like to have from the 3D window, and then I would select where I want it to go, and I say flower power. And then I say save, it's going to my desktop. Then it will ask you what format you would like it to be. If you want it to be a transparent background, because maybe we didn't like my picture and we want to have a more appropriate setting, then you could do it with a transparent background, which means it will only export the avatar and the design, and then you can place it in another background, maybe for your presentations. And you can also select which formats you would like. This also then influences the quality of the image. So depending if you are exporting for web or if you're exporting for print, then you would consider the settings. Also here I had a single view. It is also option to make a multi-view. Standardized CLO has front, back, side, um, but you can also choose to make your own views, and you can also choose how many counts it will do. Since I didn't customize my views, it's just repeating the amount of views. Okay. Today we didn't go into colorways, but colorways is very important and relevant to know. If you have a collection, you probably might have some designs in specific colors or specific prints. Then it's possible to, just like we did the fabrics, you would have a table where you see, okay, this is one colorway, so it would be like the blue belt with the glittery stickers, and the next colorway would be the same design, but maybe with a knitted material and a crocheted pocket, for example. Okay, so if I would do this, I can select if I want it to save it as a separate image, or if I want to save it together. So together, I would really get this strip outside of CLO, and as separate is as it sounds. So I will say not separate because I don't want my desktop to be full with images at the moment. And then you see, initially I was starting with, I will go here. Wait, sorry, because I'm not sharing that screen. But if you try it out now, then you would have the image. Or wait, maybe I should just move between. Let me see if I can just make this one smaller, because then I can bring the image so you can see what it did. Yeah, here, and then if I open it, it still opens it on my other screen. So let me move it again. Here, you see that it saved the view in the different angles, and it made it possible to export them as one. You can then also choose to export them separately, which would mean you would have each view in a separate file, which gives you a bit more room to play with your presentation and the work. But if I go back here, I just mentioned that you could have different views, but then you need the option to make the snapshots. So if I go and zoom in, focus, and 2, I want it to be from the front. And then here you see the option, if you right click in the 3D window, custom view. If I do this, I can use my little camera, add current viewpoint. I could turn my avatar, make another shot. Maybe I want something completely different. So now these have become my custom views. What you could do now is you could double click and you could to rename them. Sorry, not double click, right click, and then it's possible to rename them. And now that if I do flower power front, enter, that's the name. If I could say save the views. This is a very important one. I don't use it that much, but when you are doing a whole collection book and you want to have consistency in your presentation, what you could do is to save the views, because then you could present several works within the same angles with the same settings. But for now, I would like to export it. So I go again to File, Snapshot, and I say, okay, 3D window. And then it's a bit odd because it always asks you for the name first and then the settings, but flower power 2. And I will save it on my computer. But this time I decided that I want separate images and I do not want all of them. I want maybe 2. And then I want to select which one I want. And then I can customize a shot. This is the one I want. And maybe I want it 3/4 left. These are the 2 that I want to export, and then I can save. And then now if I go back to my screen, there I had the images that they were together. And now for the second trial, you see it opens it on the, yeah, then I have a single image. And the idea behind this is that you are able to quickly share your thoughts and your work, because sometimes you do not have the resources, the time, or it's not the point of the assignment to have a high quality render, which takes more time, more resources, and more fine tuning, but you just want to show an overall sketch. That's when many people use the snapshot. As I mentioned, it is also possible if you lose your way around the screen, you can click 2, it will bring you back to the front. It is also possible to do a snapshot of your patterns. So if I would click, I will select these and F for focus. Here I have my patterns. I say maybe I want a snapshot of my patterns because I want to get some feedback overall from my teachers. I could go to snapshot and do 2D patterns. And here I get the first overview to export my patterns as an example. Keep in mind that this is not the export of patterns. We're not going into that today, but this is really to give you an overview. Maybe you want to make a garment, and this shows you that you're going to have 50 pieces when you might not want or be able to put in that labor. So then you need to go revise your patterns and you say, how do I bring it down to 20? So, but this gives like an idea of the proportions to your teachers and to yourself as well, what might be needed. Okay, so I'm gonna cancel because I don't want to export it. And then the next step would be that you can also go to File, and you also have the option to have a turntable. What the turntable does is literally go with the X around your avatar to show the work. But maybe you would like to have your avatar be a bit more exciting than the T pose or the A pose for this part. So what you could go is here on top within CLO. Remember, I mentioned you could use either the male or the female library and go to pose. So I double click, I select pose, and then I see if I hover, it will show the names of the different poses. If I double click, I say only the pose. And then it's in a moment gonna change the pose of the avatar. What is very important to keep in mind that you should already have your garments in place, because if they're like all around the room, they're gonna crash with the avatar, and sometimes it makes your file crash. Okay, so I didn't choose an exciting pose as I thought I would, but okay. This is my pose, and now I want to do a turntable. You go to File, Video Capture, Turntable, and here at the bottom of my screen, you see that I can select the size and the proportions of the video. You can choose if it's landscape or not. And also, you can choose the axe, because the line going through the head of the avatar, that's the axe of which the table is gonna turn. You can choose how long the turntable should last. I will say 5 seconds, and I will click record. And here you see at the bottom of my screen, it says recording time. Depending on how many frames you want, also later on when you're doing a render, that will also influence how detailed and how smooth this turning is, but it will also influence how long it takes to make this export. Okay, so you see now that I've made my recording, and this is the first more straightforward way to also show your designs in 3D. How is it going so far for everybody? You can choose to delete it, and you can also re-record it. So that is also possible. And since recently, you can also make the recording without a background. So with a transparent background, which also makes it possible to bring it into other environments or other post-production settings. Yes, I will delete my video for now. Are there any questions so far?
Nothing at the moment.
Okay. So then what I would suggest is that try out this a little bit. And maybe in about 10 minutes, I can show how to do the final render. So that you get an introduction briefly to the render settings, because then you see the difference in the quality of your exports. And then we are almost closing up. We're showing some work from our students as well, from Willem de Koning. It's really exciting to share their process with you. You saw the interviews earlier today. We will show some renderings that they made within CLO and fully enclosed. So we want to show you that you can start small and gradually learn the skills to be able to express your concepts and your creativity and your unique self even better every time.
And all these that the students which are going to be presented that have been going through has gone through the modules that are open source available on our website. And also there's those tutorials that you can see on our YouTube channel. So after this, if you're inspired, you can jump in there and continue your learning.
Yes.
But so 10 minutes for working, and then I will also put on the comment section Google Drive link if you want to share your photos with us now or today or after today's session. Feel free to do that. So I will share that later in a second.
Thank you.
Just another heart in need of rescue, waiting on love's sweet charity. And I'm gonna hold on for the rest of my days, 'cause I know what it means to walk along the lonely street of dreams. Here I go again on my own, going down the only road I've ever known. Like a drifter, I was born to walk alone, and I've made up my mind. I ain't wasting no more time. Here I go again. Here I go again. Here I go again. Here I go again. Just say what you want from me. Wish I could mind read all of the words that you give on your lips. Your best is a mystery. You came and it's killing me, but I like the game. This way I still exist.
Yes. So we're back for the next step. I've made some small, quick adjustments to my avatar, a little bit of the pose. Um, with the time for today, we don't get to go through everything, but we have thought that probably you're curious and want to test other things as well. So if you would go to the file and scroll down, you see that we've prepared the whole scenario for you. We also have environment and animation. So what we will try to do first is to go into the render, and I will try to show you some things that you can do to the environment and to make the export. And then if there might be still some time, I can briefly show you what is possible with animation. And then we close up with some examples of our students. So if you go to the main menu on the top, you see that it says render. If you would click on it, it doesn't seem like it, but it says render again, and that is a button. So if you click on it, you get this window, which will ask you to, you may guess, again, click to start. Once you double click, what will happen is that it will load my avatar, which I have in the 3D window, in my render window. So as we heard from our guests today and as well from Fernanda, there's different settings that you could use in order to get a different quality of your work. We could choose to zoom in on the avatar. And here in the render window, what it makes it possible is to add more realistic lighting and shadow to your scene in order to export your work for presentations. That can be either that you're doing snapshots, turntables, but it can also be animated scenes. Very fun to know as well is that in CLO you can work with wind. There used to be only one wind tool, so that would define everything. But now you can also have different wind tools added to your scene, which makes it a bit more exciting as well with the movement of the fabrics. Okay, so if everybody was able to find here render, render again, you get the first time once you have opened CLO that day, it will show the gray screen with a small text saying render, click to render. And on the right side, you will see the tools that you can use within the rendering. Here is whenever you make a change and it doesn't show it right away, you could do refresh render. This is to stop. Okay, this is like fantastic. This is how I want it to go. And I could click for my final render on this play button. It is also possible to make a copy of the current image. And here you can save the image file. But we're going to look into these today. So if you see this little image picture pictogram with a little screw, so it says image and video properties. That's what we need for today. We are going to export an image. So therefore you select image, but as I mentioned, you can do a turntable or an animation. And as we learned earlier, just before the break, you can also select different views. And then maybe right now I'm only seeing this view, but I had preset 3 other views. If I say custom views and I had also 3 other views, when I do the render, it will automatically make sure to render all 4 views for me. Okay, and then we talked about the colorways, but I didn't make extra colorways today, so I'm just gonna do the current one. And I will select the settings of my image, and then you can choose the orientation. So it can be landscape or portrait. Sometimes you don't see the change right away in the window because of how you're dividing your screen. And then here you can choose if you want to have a background just similar to in the 3D window, sorry. And I can say apply and close. And then I refresh. And then here, yes. Then you see that it has added the background color, but maybe I don't want that when I have my final export. So I can also say transparency. So this means just like before, but in a higher quality, it will export just the avatar with a silhouette. Okay, has everybody gotten it so far? Or are there questions so far? Maybe that's better to ask. No? Okay. So first you select the view, you select the settings of your pixels, and you select if you want a background or not. And what is important as well is to, you can click custom name, and then below it, it says flower power render, I'm gonna say. And then it's very important from the beginning to decide where you're gonna save your work. So I would really recommend to make a separate folder. So I could say now new folder and then render 22.1.25, create. So now when I start to save my renders in a moment, I know that there's where they're going to go. And why is this important? Also, when you are making, for example, a render of an animation, animation consists of different images rendered in a sequence. And sometimes when you're doing the render, in hindsight, you see your video and you're like, oh, I don't like the quality, or I wanted the lighting to be different, or maybe at a specific step, something goes wrong. Then you could go to the file where your video is being rendered, and it starts to gradually add the frames. So this means that you do not have to wait 50 hours or 5 hours to know approximately what the result would be. You could already have a sneak peek, which gives you a little bit more control on when to stop rendering and when to make tweaks. Can you save the pictures and render as other sizes? Yes, you can. So if you see here, it was showing it initially in the pixels, but right below it, it also has the formats more traditionally known for print. And it's also possible, for example, to export it first and then in post-production scale it to what you might need. Okay, so for now, I do not want a background, and I selected where I wanted to save. Then here you can play when you are a bit more experienced with it. If you have some experience with photography, it might relate a bit more. You can think about the distance from the camera to the avatar. You can also play with the angles. Can I put the same background for rendering as I did for the snapshots? Yes. So if you go back here, so not the first one where we did the color of the background, instead of here changing the color, you could select this little 4 boxes, and then you could go and find the image that you would like to use. For example, and then it will be there. Why don't you see it yet, you might ask? Is because I have the transparency on. And now you see that now I've been able to add the graphic to it. So where it says background, there's 3 considerations: the color, do you want to see a background or not, and if you want to add an image. Yes, no problem. Okay, so now that my wild background is there, I would like to maybe go to the next step, which is the lighting. Earlier, it was mentioned that it can be very useful to use lighting in tools such as Blender or Maya, and then later on, when you bring it into the gaming or a final production with Unreal Engine or Unity. But what we said, we don't want you to get overwhelmed by the possibilities, but inspired by what you can do. So I think in that way, in this case, CLO has updated the tools quite a bit so that you can start to get acquainted with the different tools already within the same environment. And they have done that, for example, by using lights. And if you go here to this little light bulb with a screw, you see that it says environment map. That means always around us we have light, right? Even like in a room in existence, there's light. And then you can choose what kind of lighting you would want to have within that environment. So then you can select here, they have different light settings which you can select. I won't go too much into the detail because it's not for the program, but then you can do lights. And then sometimes you don't see it is because you can choose if you want to see it in 3D window or not, and if you want to see it in render or not. So this is why now you didn't see my background anymore. And then if you are working from Windows, then you are able to select GPU. And if it's Mac, it's only possible to do it with CPU. But if you're working from a Windows PC or laptop, I would recommend to change it to GPU. Also, the processor has been improved so that it also goes faster. Okay, lastly from this, I would like to show you that you can reduce the noise threshold, and that makes it possible. Think that we are producing in pixels. The lower the noise threshold, the less distortion there would be, the less noise there will be in your image. And then depending on what your goal is, I say make conscious choices. Is the light important in that image, or is the material more important? What are you willing to compromise, or what is the right balance for your presentation? So you can choose here, for example, that the light could be medium, but then the materials need to be very high. And then I will just check if I have everything I need. And then I will refresh. And now that I see, for one thing here, in my render, I had chosen, for example, that I want my belt to be fur. So I will go to this fabric in my object browser, and I will click on it. And I will scroll up, and I see that I want it to be fur, but I did not put the fabric type into fur. So now I could do that and make it into fur. And now you see that I have this fun little fur belt, and I can choose later on when I practice a bit more, I can choose to make different gradients on the fur, or I could even bring like a print in it, that it has like a pattern that is all possible as well in the render mode. And we mentioned, okay, I could make it glass. That's also possible. And then you see it becomes a little transparent because of that. But I can also choose, for example, to do a light. And now it doesn't, you don't see it directly because we didn't do the settings of it yet. But you could go and say that this is the light, and then you play with the settings so that it has more brightness. But I like my fur belt, so I'm gonna go back to that. Fabric, and then fur. And there is one thing that when you are gonna work with your displacement map, for example, this one didn't have one yet, I will let CLO generate it for me, then it gets this dimension. If you make a displacement map, but for example, you don't really add an amount to it just yet, then it's not gonna give this dimension that you're trying to look. So you need to tell it not just to be thick, but what thickness do you want it to be? Okay, so now I wait, you see that the image is getting crispier. I could choose as well for one last step before doing my render, is that I can say, okay, this is what I want. And I am gonna click final render. I will stop it so it knows, okay, I'm ready. And then I say final render. And then it's saving the image on my computer. Let me just, sorry, because I cannot see the rendering. So the rendering is in progress. What you could also choose to do is that you say, okay, I do not want my avatar, for example, to be visible. I could hide it. And then I will stop and refresh. And then the avatar is not in the field. But I could also say, okay, you know what? I would like to add another light, but not here. If I go, I have to check because sometimes also in CLO they are changing the UI, so sometimes it's a bit tricky. Here I want to wait, cancel. That's a bit weird. Yes, sorry. I wanted to show this is that here I had the initial light, but you can also go here in the presets. And since sometimes we don't know that much yet about what the different settings could be, I could go in here and I can select another light that maybe fits better my concept. So maybe I like this, but not in these colors, and then I can change it, but then I already have the lights that are necessary to get that balance. And then I can choose here, okay, in what way I think this would fit. And now that I'm happy with it, I can choose to click on play, stop first. So it stops rendering, and then I click play, and it will make my final image for my render.
Do you have like some tips and tricks with the render time and settings in general for people working with different computers and
yeah, so as I mentioned just now is that if it's for Windows, it's better to work with a GPU, because then with Windows you can select the two. And also the more lights you add to the scene, the heavier it is for rendering. So I would also say it's a matter of compromise testing what is a balance. When it comes to the computers in general, when it's a Mac, Generally, they cannot really support CLO that much when it comes to rendering. It's really bad actually for your computer. I would say that starting from like the M1 chip onwards, they are a bit more capable of dealing with CLO. And then you can check what many students try to do is, let's say if they're gonna render animation and the animation is say 30 seconds and they try to render all at once, I would recommend that you can have the 30 seconds animation, but you can select how far of the animation you want to render each time. So my recommendation would be to do it in parts. So that first you're rendering the first 10 seconds and then you render, because then you can still add them together in post-production, but then there's a guarantee of progress because computers are still computers, and sometimes a file gets corrupted and you were like 80% of the render and you lose all of it. I think it's okay to take steps. It also helps you see that you are making progress and that it will be okay.
Yeah, and of course, then all the information, the more complicated garment, you have the
Yeah.
materials like fur that takes more.
Fur, light, glitter, glass, all of these things. And that's why those maps that we were learning about for the materials are very important as well, because sometimes you can have only the texture map, and that is already giving the feeling of this really heavy material. And that's why using a normal map with, for example, a fur gives the impression of a fur, depending on the goal that you need, without compromising on render time.
Yeah, good tips.
Yes, and then I will see, I will stop, see how far my render is. It's at 71%. So as soon as it's ready, I will show you what it has become. But maybe in the meantime, I can show you what the students' work became after they have made their digital twins. So let me see, I have it here. And then maybe you guys can tell me if you can hear the sound, and then I...
Welcome all to the
And
Base Age Utopia Ball, hosted by Mother, aka BINK. Category is European Runway. Who's up first? Okay.
So throughout the assignment, we try to hack the system and try to support, oh, sorry, I muted it instead of lowering it. We try to support the world building of the students by using the tools in an unexpected way. So today we learned how to really bring the garments in, I mean, the environment, like small background change and add some light, but you can also bring in 360 images. And then we invited our students to go into the fields and scan the environment, learn about the other, step outside themselves, and try to bring this into the context of world building and considering inclusivity, diversity. Do they see themselves represented? And this is an example of a project like that. So this was Bink's project. Then let me see what you see. Here it's telling me already that my render is ready, and it shows me where the folder is. But if you're not there, that might disappear. So that's why I always recommend to check where it's saving it. And here I would open, double click. Oh, it opened it in another window. Sorry about that. And here I have my final render. So this is the first steps into getting into that. So I really invite you to try it out and see what you think of it. In the meantime, I will show the last few examples, because Babette was also mentioning that inclusivity is about more than sizing, but it's also about like age representation and how you affect society, or how society affects you, and how can we use these tools to share these messages.
In only the Netherlands, there are over 290,000 people with dementia. In 20 years, this will be doubled. If we think about people with dementia, we mostly think of white old people sitting in a nursing house locked away from the society. What if there is a future where we all have dementia?
And here you see that we were hacking, or the students learned how to hack Flow, bring in their own environment, and use the camera within Flow itself. Share their message.
Where we all have dementia. Where we all have dementia. If we think about it, we mostly think but we won't forget there is still a human underneath the disease.
Let me see if I can go back to the slides properly. Almost. And also we have, of course, the idea is to support culture, the expression of it. How are we bringing this back to nature, back to ourselves? This is a work by Tundu Bram. And she also shows you that you can bring back multiple avatars in Flow. How do you build your scene and your story?